We can talk to the former Deputy Prime Minister, Lord Heseltine. It's always good to see you, Lord Heseltine. We spoke just before the election, and you told me that, you were advising people to vote not for the Conservatives, but for maybe some of those former Conservatives who were independents, or for the Liberal Democrats. They didn't listen to you. Why not?
Well, you have to be modest about the role you play in life. They didn't listen because they wanted to get out of the austerity, and they saw Brexit as a route to do that. And I don't think it's much more complicated than that. So, we've lost. We have to face up to that. We're going to leave Europe.
Well, with that admission, and to be fair to you, I mean, it's good of you to say that, because a lot of people are still saying, well, we're going to change the fight, we're going to keep that fight going. But you're saying, are you, that actually it's time now to draw a line?
Well, the reality is that Boris Johnson has got a thumping parliamentary majority, and there's no way that they will not get their legislation through in very short order. So we will leave the European Union. We have then got a period of uncertainty, but frankly, it's pie in the sky to start talking about fighting on in the present circumstances. And I have no doubt at all that my fellow peers in the House of Lords will take the same view. We are not there to defy the will of the people.
So what is your feeling then? What did you think when that result started to come through in that very dramatic exit poll, of course? I mean, obviously a sense of disappointment, I guess, that what you were hoping for Europe wasn't going to be happening. But are you confident that a strong Conservative government can bring forward those one nation Conservative ideas which you advocated during your time in office?
Well, it's much better than that, isn't it? Because the policies that I advocated were supported first by Margaret Thatcher, then John Major, and then David Cameron. And what were they? They were to move heavy resources into the restoration of formerly prosperous areas that had seriously declined. And the next thing was to put someone in charge, either through development corporations, but much more desirably through the creation of local mayors. And we've now got local mayors in most of the big conurbations. And interestingly, we have mayors of Conservative and Labour policy. So there is a terrific opportunity for the Prime Minister. He won't win unless he works with those mayors. But as he's a former mayor himself, and he's a very practical politician, he knows that without me having to say it. He's already promised to raise the powers of the mayors in the existing areas. London already is a mayoralty. And the next question is whether he's prepared to, frankly, complete the reforms which have been on the agenda for 60 years in order to bring about unitary counties and to give the proper leadership to those counties, because within them are quite a lot of the sort of towns and places that have gone Brexit. So there's an urgency. And my own view is that Boris Johnson knows that. He's used language about that. And he has all the weapons which have been used effectively, but perhaps not on a large enough scale, by previous Conservative governments.
So, I mean, what would the fallout from that be, the result of that be? Are you saying that would in itself lead to greater investment in deprived areas, particularly in the north, and almost see, maybe in places like Blythe Valley and other areas in Northumberland and elsewhere, see the sort of regeneration which you created in Canary Wharf?
Well, try Liverpool as a better example.
Okay.
Canary Wharf was within a stone's throw of the City of London. It wasn't the biggest challenge to try and spread that wealth. Changing places like the Hume Estate in Manchester and the banks of the Mersey and many other similar places, on Teesside, for example, and the banks of the Tyne in Newcastle, the incredible changes in Manchester, Salford, all of these things followed the policies which the Conservative government of which I was a member believed. But there's one other thing that I think the Prime Minister should take seriously. The divisions in Whitehall, the great baronies of power, the specific functions of government departments, is an inhibitor to getting coherent local policies working on the ground. And I think that it would be very sensible for the Prime Minister, in looking at his cabinet, to create a minister to coordinate all those essential features of education, employment, skills, housing, under one cabinet committee in order to be able to talk coherently to the mayors. We've done it locally. There are now mayors responsible for all of these things. But when they look up to Whitehall, they're faced with a dozen different government departments, all with their own agenda, and with no effective coordinating mechanism. That would be an important change to make, as not just effective management, but as a signal that Boris is determined to see this thing through, which I personally believe he is, because he is a former mayor, he knows the advantages, and he's always, in my view, been a supporter of this agenda.
I mean, he's got a big incentive, hasn't he, in terms of keeping on side those voters who, in his words, lent him their vote in traditional Labour heartlands. I mean, he really is going to have to work to show them real difference,
yes.
Isn't he?
I think you put your nail on the head, absolutely, that there's no short-term solution to this issue. You are dealing with long-term issues of social and structural decline. So he has to get on with it. Otherwise, the election that follows, there will be retribution. So he's forced the bridgehead, but he's now got to hold the bridgehead. And if I give you another example of knife crime, we've heard a huge amount about knife crime and 20,000 extra police. If you look at the figures and you break them down, a year from now, there won't be a single extra policeman on the streets. It takes time to recruit and train. And the only way to deal with knife crime seriously is to understand the social conditions that have given rise to it. And the only way to do that is to earn the trust of the communities from which the perpetrators of knife crime come. If I may make a most obvious and rather daunting thought, the first person from the public sector likely to spot the potential knife crime addict is the primary school teacher. Because these things don't happen as a sort of rush of blood at the age of 16. It's the dropouts from school, it's the broken families, it's the gang leaders, all of that create that culture which leads to such devastating effect. And if I could advise Boris, the first thing he should do would be to call in the mayors and say, look, you all come from different parties. Now, I want each of you to come forward within 6 months with a report about how we solve this community tension which is creating these conditions at the extreme.
Look, we are out of time, I'm sorry to say, but I do just want to ask you one last point. I mean, using your vast political experience, how does the Labour Party reposition itself now?
Well, they should get rid of Corbyn, full stop, end of story.
But can they move back to the centre ground? Is that a necessary move?
Oh, yes, of course they can. And they probably will. I mean, there are huge numbers of Labour Party supporters that I know, friends of mine, who just can't believe the extraordinary deviation to no man's land that the party took.
Michael Heseltine, it is always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much indeed.